I recently took part in the Wuj Showdown series, which I thoroughly enjoyed, despite not performing to the standard that I'd like. This led me to interrogate my own relationship with losing and the negative emotions that might follow, research the literature to find out more on the how and the why those states of negativity might appear after losses and how they may be an impediment to the quality of my play, and finally, I partnered up with two competitive players with more experience than myself to add practice to that theory. Those two being Pentestag from Rift Lab and NovaRiftbound. And I'm Simon from Games Deconstructed. Let's get started! Starting from the very fundamentals, there's a couple mechanisms through which losing makes us feel bad. It disrupts our need for competence, to feel like we are experts at what we're doing. And psychologists believe that this need to feel competent is a major motivating factor behind taking on any sort of challenging endeavor, and playing a game of Riftbound is definitely something of a challenge compared to the other types of recreation we might otherwise be doing. There's also the need for social validation. We want to be perceived as players of a certain caliber by our friends, opponents, peers, and no matter if it's founded in anything, losing plants a lingering doubt in our minds that perhaps our social status among those groups was undermined somehow. We see our loss reflected in the eyes of our colleagues and don't like the picture of us that reflection paints. Especially since there are still present hints of the stereotype that games of skill, like Riftbound, might be a reflection of our generalized intelligence. And while we probably know that that isn't true on our good days, that is not going to prevent me from feeling a little bit dumb when I go 1-3 in an especially spectacular fashion. To get a little more inside baseball with it, there are negative emotional neural signals related to unfulfilled predictions. This is related to the pattern recognition mechanism in our brain. If we are expecting a reward, like the good feelings we get from winning, and that reward doesn't come, the brain shoots out a negative dopamine signal, likely to recalibrate our expectations for the next time we have to make a prediction like this. These negative dopamine signals are noteworthy for feeling not great. And as such, going into a match with not just the hope, but an expectation of winning might increase our likelihood of feeling signals like this.
Where tilt originates from is a source of entitlement. You feel entitled to win, right? You feel like you should win. And so when things aren't going your way, for whatever reason, it creates that frustration. And you start to feel that entitlement and that the reality that you're experiencing isn't correct in some sort of reason. And that sort of, and obviously none of that is reasonable. None of it is. But that's all that goes in the mind, whether or not we want to admit it out loud. That's what happens. And it creates frustration and tilt. That's like the most immediate instinctive feeling. My mind is no longer focused on the game. I'm now focused on what should, quote, be happening. You know what I mean?
All these elements combined form what we might perceive as negative emotions. And interestingly, researchers divide those into two main categories: activity-related and outcome-related. What we feel during versus what we feel after. The first of the two might be enjoyment, frustration, boredom, and the second are pride, joy, anger, anxiety, regret, stuff like that. These can be difficult to disentangle mid-match because they call for a high degree of introspection, which might not be possible on the spot as you're making card game decisions in the same time. But interestingly, this does mirror a trend seen among pro players where they try to separate their perception of their play during the match from its outcome. And for me, this idea does sound like something I would like to interrogate more after tournaments. Do my negative outcome-based emotions color my retroactive perception of the process-based ones? And does that emotional color in turn taint my perception of my own quality of play? Am I being overcritical of my lines just because I did badly?
there is too much focus at the moment on whether you win or lose being an indicator of whether you played well or didn't. Whether you played well or whether you didn't play well should be the go-to question that you ask yourself. I talk to a lot of people about this, and especially when they're tilting, and I try and help them with this exact piece of advice. Our job as card game players, when we're going to play an event, it is not to win. It is to make as little mistakes as possible, and you can control that. You can monitor that, and you can focus on that. If you make as little mistakes as possible, you are likely to win. But that doesn't matter. We need to be focusing on, did you do well, did you do badly?
Now I am getting pretty deep into all this stuff, not because I'm an alien who only learned the concept of human emotion yesterday, but because we will be building on top of this stuff to realize what impact these emotions might be having on the quality of our play, and ultimately how to combat that negative impact. And recognizing these negative emotions is going to be the first step here.
So the biggest identifier is frustration and a little bit of anger with myself, because I know it's a me problem. It's not my opponent's job, to keep my mental straight. It's not the judge's job. It is mine and mine alone. So identifying that, hey, I'm going off the deep end, so to speak, a little bit, getting frustrated. Those are the emotions that really come into play with me.
For me, I know immediately that I'm tilting when there's a sort of burning frustration and this it's hard to put into words, but this feeling of it being unfair.
Moving on to the impact of these negative emotions in our play, let's say we are already in a situation where we are experiencing negativity during a tournament. How and through what pathways is that an impediment to the quality of our play? Unfortunately, there is a lot of hints in psychological literature. For a start, let's take anxiety, which is on the list of negative outcome-based emotions. And I can recall from personal experience stepping into a match after a particularly bad loss and feeling that anxious feeling of, oh fuck, what if this happens again? What if I misplay again? Now, anxiety has a proven negative effect on perception and short-term memory performance. Two elements that are undoubtedly useful when playing Riftbound, primarily for the purpose of gathering and retaining information. And I do have a separate fundamentals video on how you can use information in-game and outside of it to increase your chances of winning. There should be a card somewhere on screen right now. But how does it work specifically? A lot of the information you might be hoping to use passes through your short-term memory, the bit in the brain referred to as the brain's scratch pad, which stores and processes 20 to 30 second chunks of information. The long-term impact of that storage and processing going haywire is making worse your ability to remember what was recycled and won't be seen again this game, how many copies of a card you've seen last game, what's in your opponent's trash, how much might was on the battlefield last time you checked, how many runes and cards in both players' hands, and so on and so forth. That last couple are public information, you will be able to recheck them during the match, but that of course takes a little bit of additional time and a little bit of additional effort. Attention comes in even earlier in the info gathering process. It's your brain's ability to filter out informational noise and decide what's relevant and what's important. Low performance on attention means we get distracted more easily, perhaps failing to acknowledge a piece of game info being revealed at all. So it never makes its way to short-term memory. Worst case scenario, it leads to fully overlooking a pivotal bit of known information. A hidden being played to a battlefield, a line of text on a rarely seen card, a star-crossed returned to hand with Annie a turn ago. This is the impact you would like to eliminate first, because it can be directly game-losing.
Something I pride myself on is having the ability to read board states very effectively and what my opponent's representing. And as soon as I go on tilt, that is out the window. I have no clue what's going on. I am just playing cards to play them. I am not taking in information that my opponent is giving me, and I'm just doing my own thing, which is not conducive to success in card games.
The slightly more moderate alternative is that you will have to switch to manual on parts of this process that used to be automatic. You will have to recheck certain stuff or make a conscious effort to retain that info. And that is going to be to the detriment of some even more impactful card game skills, like your ability to calculate complex lines or strategize in the medium to long term. Because of course you will be doing those last two either faster, because you're spending more time on stuff that used to be automatic, or you will be doing them with a lower percentage of your mental capacity. And that of course is going to be detrimental. The next couple of pathways of negative impact we will do a little bit more rapid fire. Increased self-scrutiny, getting into your own head on tasks that should normally be automatic, like the ones above, has been provably associated with choking in both games of dexterity like golf and certain purely mental games like chess. And looking back on how in my own head I get when choking, I would suspect the same mechanism to come into play in our game as well. Studies on tilt presenting as frustration or rage show a marked decrease on certain other potentially card-slinging related faculties. There isn't a lot of studies specific to TCG players, but I believe studies done on chess or poker players to be decent analogs here. And there is evidence that feelings of anger lower your mathematical calculation accuracy, and this in turn will make calculating the remaining outs in your deck, or what might be on the battlefield after certain things happen, or, the total might swing from a complex LeBlanc line a bit harder. And those same feelings can also influence one's approach to risk-taking.
One is, I'm going to just play recklessly and relentlessly, and I'm just gonna blow my opponent out, and if they have it, they have it. I don't care anymore, right? I'm putting all my cards on the table. If they have an answer, whatever.
Tilt will often cause us to prefer riskier lines, through an increased feeling of certainty and a reduced perception of danger. This might cause us to make a questionable play with a more swingy outcome, like moving into a set battlefield, believing that they couldn't possibly have that second punch first, and we probably look good if they don't, but we lose the game on the spot pretty much if they do. Whereas a more conservative line, like building up base, would be objectively better here once all possibilities are calculated with a clear head. There's also the possibility that these swingier lines, which most of the time lead to a quicker resolution of the match, might be an attempt to get it over with.
It comes also from a place of kind of just wanting to be over. Like, you just want to do the line that ends the game the fastest, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whatever, and hopefully it works, because you just want it to stop. You want it to end.
To end the match as quickly as possible and be able to handle that emotional distress in a less competitive, more comfortable environment. It took us a while, but we should now be aware of why losing might cause these negative emotions, what range of emotions we are talking about, and how they might impair our card-slinging ability. This, I feel, is a good start to start talking about solutions. But before we move on to these, if you're enjoying the video so far, I would greatly appreciate if you left a sub and a like on the video. I know it's a cliché YouTuber thing to say, but it genuinely does help. Now, on to solutions. A University of California study found that pro League of Legends players who perceived tilt as something malleable, that they can control or lead towards more positive outcomes, led to them getting less tilted and choose healthier emotional regulation mechanisms. Less keyboard smashing, more going to take a walk. It's easier said than done to treat tilt as something you can control if you don't already, so the exact way that this is going to happen is going to vary greatly person to person, but it is going to mark a definite step on our path to improvement. Another idea worth exploring is if these problems are more likely to subside as we get more practice, as we get more games in, more card game experience.
I do think it's the case. I think there is some level of diminishing returns, of course, right? You could play 2,000 games and, probably by the 1,000th game, your mental is about as good as it's going to be unless you work on it specifically. But for brand new players, the thing that I always tell them is just play the game. Don't worry about win-loss rate. Don't worry about these micro and macro factors that are happening. Just get some game time in, and eventually you can build up to understanding why you're losing games, and that will have a cascading effect on improving your mental, because you know why you lost the game, you can improve on it, and so on and so forth. It's an exponential thing.
I'm a positive guy. I hate being the bearer of bad news. But it is with my full heart that I say this. No, more games, more competitive experience does not make you immune to tilt. How well you look after your mental health and understand sports psychology and understand understand yourself is what's going to help you with tilt. Just simply playing more won't address the problem, I don't think. And the reason as well, I think, when you get into the higher levels of play, and this is a broader discussion for what happens when sort of people get more competitive and more focused on winning. I spoke about a feeling of entitlement, and that, as you win more, gets stronger, gets reinforced. And winning more, playing more games, or getting more experience tends to make you win more, or this kind of thing. And that can have the opposite effect. It can make you more prone to tilt. It can make you more prone to feeling that you should win because you have way more experience than this other person sat in front of you.
And to attempt to marry together those two contrasting points of view, I would speculate that more practice on its own is unlikely to lead to improvement. But it does present an opportunity, and indeed a requirement, to figure out strategies to deal with those negative emotions. It's kind of like just mindlessly spamming more games is not the best strategy to improve at Riftbound, but improvement at the game does happen alongside you playing more games. A University of Helsinki study of nearly 500 poker players found strong support that more poker experience correlated with lower perceived severity of tilt, but interestingly, not lower frequency of it. Meaning that more experienced players didn't feel these negative emotions less often, but they did feel them less strongly. The results do not support my above argument directly, but are compatible with it. The process of getting more card game experience is an opportunity to improve at becoming tilt-proof, but it is not that improvement itself. Going a bit further, there is a proven neurobiological effect, meaning there is an actual measurable change happening in your brain activity that comes with being able to catch and label negative emotions. It's something that's used in multiple types of psychotherapy, which I will not go into detail on because I am not certified to do so, but this is why I went into so much detail on the distinct flavors, types, and emotional reactions to losing before. I feel like this is a start of a framework that can lead us to be more effective at catching and being able to recognize which of these emotions we're dealing with, as opposed to just an overall feels bad man kind of aura. In situations where these emotions are already present, perhaps the loss felt particularly bad and outside of our control, there's a variety of emotional regulation strategies that can be put into place. Sports research, unsurprisingly, paints expressive suppression, trying to choke the negative emotions down until they go away, as the least effective one, both short-term and long-term. A more effective option is cognitive reappraisal, trying to reframe what a loss means. If I misplayed on my last turn, perhaps my lizard brain is telling me that this undermines my self-image as a decent player. I can push the conclusion of that misplay to instead be an increased priority to double check if my lethal is actually lethal, or look for contributing factors like fatigue or stress that I can hope to keep in check the next time I'm faced with the possibility of missing lethal, moving the conclusion of a bad moment from a negative reflection on me as a player to something a bit more productive. A middle-of-the-road strategy that a decent number of card game players go for is complaining. In terms of its effectiveness, literature suggests that it may prolong negative feelings of anger and rage. So a lot of the more experienced players learn if it works for them and utilize it strategically, if at all.
Because you have to keep it in mind that if this worms its way into you, then then it's all over. Like you might as well kiss the rest of the event goodbye.
Is when you go to an event, hopefully you have some friends with you, but if you don't, find someone who also just had a bad beat, complain about it together for 5-10 minutes, and then move on. After that, it just doesn't matter. Get it out of your system. It is human nature to want to talk to another human about a less than desirable situation you were just in. So for me, it is my good friend Eric. I go to him and I'm like, dude, this just happened. It's horrendous, blah, blah, blah. Then I step outside with him, get some fresh air. Next round comes, it doesn't matter anymore. It didn't happen, right? Each round is its own individual event, and you should treat it as such.
For other flavors of tilt, complaining doesn't necessarily prolong or intensify them directly, according to literature, but it can lead to rumination, mulling the same negative thought over and over, and that does prolong negative feelings of disappointment, anxiety, regret. If that's what tends to happen to you, I would echo Nova's words from moments ago: complain ahead, but cut that rumination thought process before your next match. Another kind of middle ground strat is called attentional deployment, turning your attention to something else, redeploying it, so to speak. And I feel like this is what's behind Prismat doing push-ups to boost his mental game. At least that's my perception of how it works. If you feel like you're at risk of dwelling on a negative emotion after a match, it can be worthwhile to just do something else with your time. Distract yourself by taking a walk, going to get water, talking to a friend about their game last round instead of yours. It will always feel a bit weird to me to give people emotional regulation strategy advice. First of all, because it's way easier to give that advice than to actually implement it. And secondly, because I feel like it risks running into some of the most cliché advice on earth, because with a high likelihood you already know what healthy emotional regulation strategies look like. It's my hope that this video reinforced why they might be important and what to be looking for in terms of what's happening after a loss or a bad beat. That was a hell of a deep dive, if I dare say so myself. Let me know in the comments what's your #1 favorite emotional regulation strategy after a bad loss. A huge thank you to Pentestag and Nova for providing their expert points of view. Check out their content using the links in the description and the pinned comment. And a special thank you to the Patreon supporters over on patreon.com/gamesdeconstructed, especially Ola Bryner, Jakub Burdun and Piotr Michalak. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.